BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Alright, hello everybody. Today is Friday. Another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? And on Wednesdays this year, I've been doing a regular segment about the New Orleans Axeman, an unidentified serial killer who operated in the early part of the 20th century. And an Axeman episode did not come out on Wednesday because I was talking about the release date for my latest book, Down the Dark Lane, 3 Thrillers from the Motel. And I have to give a shout out to Shaper Art, who created some new images for the books I've written. Killer on a White Horse is the first one, and Down the Dark Lane the second. And Down the Dark Lane is definitely a companion piece. They're definitely meant to be read in that order. Killer on the White Horse first and Down the Dark Lane second. But I just greatly appreciate these pieces of artwork from Shaper Art, as well as all of the contributions that have been made in the comment section. Shaper Art, I love what you say about the true crime cases. And because today is an Anything Goes Friday subject, I thought one should continue with the Axeman case. And secondarily, I have finally begun reading Miriam C. Davis's The Axeman of New Orleans, The True Story, in its entirety. I read a portion of it last year when I did my first series on the Axeman, as well as looking at some quotations and even corresponding with Miriam Davis. But I would like to look at the beginning and the foundational material that we will use to explore the Axeman mystery. And if this is the first episode that you've heard in my multi-part series on the Axeman, that's fine. You can keep listening. I just would invite you to listen to those. They talk about the book Ready to Hang by Robert Talon, who was a journalist, writer, as well as somewhat of a less than popular socialite who was definitely prone to mingling with other people who would share ideas about the history of New Orleans. So a lot of what he obtained about the Axeman case, as well as perhaps other true crime cases, came from conversations and things being passed down in an oral way as opposed to a documented way. But his story, The Axeman Wore Wings, which was published and Ready to Hang, became the foundation for a lot of the general public's understanding of the Axeman case. And again, you can listen to the first 3 episodes of this series. The 4th one focuses on a letter that was written by the Axeman, and now getting into Miriam C. Davis. But as I said, you can subscribe, and you can also download the show for free at LaunchPad 1. There's a link to that in the description box. That's the download for the podcast version. And if you would like to support any of these efforts, you can go over to BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88. Then the easiest way to find that is in the description box. BuyMeACoffee.com allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anyone who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. Now, Miriam Davis begins the book by talking about how she became interested in the Axeman story, and it actually begins with having a conversation with her brother, and she also points out that she talks very frequently about serial killers, which I think is absolutely normal, and I do mean that. If you're listening to this far off corner of YouTube, you probably think a lot about serial killers too, and I pretty much had no one to talk to about serial killers, so that's why I started this channel, and been going on for 5 years now, so thank you to all you guys in the comments section. But when Miriam Davis is having this conversation with her brother, he tells her this story about how there was this serial killer in New Orleans who operated around 1918, and he targeted Jewish bakers. And this is, of course, referring to the Axeman. But if you've heard any of the previous episodes, you'll know that it wasn't Jewish bakers, it was Italian grocers. The majority of the Axeman's victims were of Italian descent, and they worked in the grocery store business. But I just wanted to point out how the how people can slightly change the narrative if they're learning about it secondhand or third hand, and I must be guilty of that several times here on Black Box Online Radio. But let's read something out of Miriam Davis's book. In a chapter titled "The Axeman War Wings," Robert Talon tells the story of, on the morning of May 24th, 1918, Joseph and Catherine Maggio, Italian immigrants who ran a small grocery store, were discovered dead in their bedroom. They had been assaulted with their own axe and had their throats cut. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. The assailant had gotten in by cutting out a panel in the back door. In the course of their investigation, police found a peculiar message written on the banquet, an old New Orleans term for sidewalk, near the Maggio's home, and it said, "Mrs. Maggio is going to sit up tonight just like Mrs. Tony." The police remembered that 7 years earlier in 1911, 3 other Italian grocers had been murdered with an axe. In 2 cases, their wives had been slain. Talon gave the names as Crudi, Rossetti, and Sciambra. Sciambra's first name was Tony. Was Tony Sciambra's wife Mrs. Tony on the sidewalk message? And I should point out that there is a difference in spelling. Tony is spelled Toney in the message that was written on the sidewalk, and Tony Sciambra's name is spelled Tony, the conventional spelling in the text of the book here. Was this a message from the Italian mafia? Had the couple been slaughtered by gangsters for some unknown misdemeanor? No one was ever charged with the murder, so these questions were never satisfactorily answered. The next month, Louis Bessemer, a Polish grocer, and Harriet Lowe, the woman who lived with him, were also attacked with an axe and seriously injured. Again, the weapon had been the grocer's own axe. Again, a door panel had been removed, and again nothing was reported to have been stolen. This time both victims survived, at least temporarily. Harriet Lowe changed her story several times, accusing Louis Bessemer of being a German spy and later trying to have her killed. When she died of her wounds 2 months later, Bessemer was charged with murder. And I need to throw in the interjection there because I've talked about the Axeman case before, as well as going through Robert Talon's narrative. I think a big reason why Louis Bessemer was charged with the murder of Harriet Lowe was because they found a trunk that contained documents written in different European languages, particularly German and Russian. In 1918, we're still dealing with the World War I era, lots of anti-German propaganda, or just lots of anti-German sentiment. I think that would be the better word to focus on, anti-German sentiment in the United States of America. But the thing that I always think is so odd is that the Germans were part of the Central Powers, and the Russians were part of the Allies in World War I, so they weren't on the same side. And I've shared this many times before, but just to recap, my take on the subject is Louis Bessemer was someone of East European descent, and he probably had some genuine connection to multiple languages, and he was probably fascinated by them, whether it was German, Polish, or Russian. I don't think there's anything weird about it, and having a trunk full of documents doesn't make you a spy. But as it says, he was charged with the murder, not convicted. Over the next 14 months, the killer, nicknamed the Axeman by the press, racked up a litany of victims. Mrs. Edward Schneider on August 5th of 1918, she survived. Joe Romano on August 10th of 1918, he died. Charlie, Rosie, and Mary Cortimiglia on March 10th of 1919, Mary died. And the note on that one is that Mary was the child of the Cortimiglias. Steve Boca, August 10th, 1919, survived. Sarah Lauman, September 3rd, 1919, survived. And Mike Pepitone on October 27th of 1919. He died. In almost all the cases, the MO was the same. The back door panel was cut out, the victim's own axe was used, and then the weapon was abandoned at the scene and nothing was stolen. Most, but not all, of the victims were Italian grocers. Fear of the Axeman paralyzed the immigrant community. Some terrified Italians couldn't sleep at night without posting guards to stand watch. Phantom Axemen were seen everywhere, and stories circulated about grocers waking up in the morning to find a door panel chiseled off and the Axeman outside their door. Now, this is one of the points in the book that I think is a question that can answer itself, and there are two parts to this. Most people accept that Louis Bessemer and Harriet Lowe were genuine victims of the Axeman, but they were not Italian. As I said, Louis Bessemer was Polish, and Harriet Lowe was an American of some non-Italian ethnicity. So how does that factor into this anti-Italian sentiment angle? Or, I mean, okay, so it does say that Bessemer was a Polish grocer. Does this have nothing to do with Italians at all? And this is actually about grocery store owners? I mean, I simply don't know the answers to these questions 100%, but we're trying to figure it out, and it's something that doesn't seem to be very consistent. And later on, of course, Louis Bessemer was acquitted of the murder of Harriet Lowe, but his was not the only trial. Rosie Cortimiglia accused two neighbors, elderly grocer Orlando Giordano and his son Frank, of having attacked them and her husband. Charles testified at the trial that he had not been attacked by either man, the father or the son, and neither of them were convicted, and the 18-year-old Frank was supposed to have been sentenced to death, but was later acquitted because Rosie admitted that she lied about the incident because she hated the Giordanos. Shortly after the Cortimiglia attack, the New Orleans Times-Picayune received a letter purporting to have been from the murderer. He was a fell demon from the hottest hell, and the letter claimed that he would descend on New Orleans the coming Tuesday night, looking for a victim, sparing anyone listening to jazz. And it's also, anyone who doesn't have the jazz band playing but get the axe, is more or less the message that was shared in the Axeman's letter. Talon reported that the designated evening, March 19th, was St. Joseph's night, and it was the loudest and most hilarious on any record, as jazz blared all over the city. After the death of grocer Mike Pepitone in August of 1919, the attacks finally stopped. In Talon's account, the story seems to have had a dramatic and satisfactory sequel out in California. On December 20th, Esther Pepitone, the widow of Mike Pepitone, shot and killed a New Orleans man named Joseph Mumphrey in Los Angeles. She told the police that Mumphrey was the Axeman that she had seen as he fled after murdering her husband. Convicted of his murder, Talon wrote that she served only 3 years before being released. According to Ready to Hang, Joseph Mumphrey was a career criminal and was well known to the New Orleans police, and the dates he'd been out in and out of prison matched up with the Axeman attack, and when he seemed to have disappeared, the attack stopped. So, was Mumphrey the Axeman? Now, I think that a lot of you guys are already going to be exploring the possibility of no, he was not, because this is an unsolved case, right? But if you read Robert Talon's Ready to Hang, it's a very strong and convincing and persuasive narrative about Joseph Mumphrey being the Axeman. Of course, I do not think that he was, for some reasons that I'll say later on, but I think that it just goes back to how a lot of these true crime cases that we've talked about on Black Box Online Radio have one person who has established a narrative about a particular either true crime, mystery, or serial killer case, or some combination of the both, and it's coming back to one particular source. And for the general public's understanding of the Zodiac Killer mystery, for example, well, of course, you have to look at Robert Graysmith's 1986 book Zodiac, which had all kinds of powerful impacts on the general public, and a lot of people thought that that was the definitive authority on the Zodiac Killer mystery. A lot of people believe that Graysmith's narrative was factual. However, Graysmith was caught in a series of half-truths and half-lies. Like, he gets accused of this in all of his true crime writing, splicing together two different ideas that don't belong, And once the majority of the Zodiac Killer case file was made available to the general public, people learned that, oh, this guy Robert Graysmith, who wrote a 1986 Zodiac book, wasn't completely truthful the whole time. Or even if you don't want to talk about his credibility or his intentions, his narrative was not completely accurate. Think about what I said at the beginning about how people can pass down different stories and that the story can change, and then the contemporary understanding of the story might not be the most accurate. And I think a lot of that is true in the Axeman case. If it is indeed centered on Robert Talon's Ready to Hang. And I only wanted to point out that I thought he made a rather convincing case that Joseph Mumfre was the Axeman, but we definitely will see many challenges to that narrative in this book. So, according to Ready to Hang, Joseph Mumfre, a strong Axeman suspect, but Talon even said that the evidence was only circumstantial and most New Orleanians believed that more than one killer was responsible. The two main theories were that the Mafia was responsible, or that it was a homicidal maniac, someone with a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality type as suggested by one of the investigating detectives. Alright, so the Mafia angle I've talked about frequently is that this wasn't some cold, methodical, and calculating serial killer. This was just a henchman or hitman for the mob, and the Sicilian Mafia is targeting these people because of some unknown reason. But again, if you read Ready to Hang, that narrative will be challenged very strongly, and Talon presents a very strong case that this was just a single person who was a homicidal maniac who matched up with a lot of tendencies of Joseph Mumfre. So, to continue onward, I think that there are lots of sources that have been arranged for discussion on the Axeman case. And on the Wednesday shows, I've been talking about the Long Island serial killer mystery, and then I did a segment on the Phantom Killer mystery from 1946, and that one definitely did not go as well as I wanted, and I'm going to be getting back to that one in the near future. But with the Axeman mystery, the sources are arranged so clearly. I mean, as we said, firstly, I had to read Ready to Hang by Robert Talon. Now I'm on to Miriam C. Davis's The Axeman of New Orleans, The True Story, which is going to attempt to serve as the definitive authority for the case. But what would be some of the other sources? Well, Miriam Davis talks about it here. In Blood Letters and Bad Men, crime writer J. Robert Nash argued that Mumfre was a professional killer who used an axe to kill Mike Pepitone and other victims as part of a mafia vendetta. Ah, so it's the maniacal serial killer plus the mafia angle. Alright, you see how all that comes together? Others, however, question aspects of Talon's account. In the early edition of his Hunting Humans, the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers, crime writer Michael Newton reported that city records showed that no Italian grocers named Crudi, Rossetti, or Sciambra had been killed by an axe or anything else in 1911. Since I began working on this book, The Axeman of New Orleans, two well-done works on the subject have both appeared, both times nearly giving me a heart attack. That's Miriam Davis writing. Kevin McQueen's chapter on the Axeman and the Axeman Came from Hell, and the account by Gary Christ in Empire of Sin. If either narrative had been available when I first read about the Axeman, I might not have written this book. Both are useful and well-researched explorations of the Axeman crimes, but both, I will argue, are incomplete. They don't answer the questions, and in fact, they can be answered. And Miriam Davis has also made the strong case that her book, which I'm reading now and holding, is the only true book that is dedicated to the Axeman mystery. Other books, such as Robert Talon's or even this one here from Gary Christ that she talks about, have a portion of the book dedicated to the Axeman, but this is the true book that is on the Axeman saga. And I was shocked when I learned that for the first time, because I really thought that there just would be more, that more people would be following this one. And I think that perhaps there just isn't as large of a fascination with the Axeman mystery because maybe certain aspects aren't as well documented, and some things may have been lost to time, and perhaps the media didn't create the same frenzy the way that Jack the Ripper did. And a big difference between the Axeman and the Zodiac Killer is the Zodiac has numerous correspondences, and the Zodiac is trying to more or less announce to the world that he committed specific crimes, not just like an unknown amount of crimes. The Zodiac took credit for very specific murders and stated facts that only he and the police would know. The Axeman did not. And it's quite likely that the letter that was written by the Axeman wasn't actually written by the killer. Now that there could have been a real serial killer, homicidal maniac or mafioso. There could have been a real serial killer. It's just someone wrote a letter taking credit for his crimes for a personal reason, and I discussed that in the most recent episode in the playlist, which came out last week. But I don't want to downplay the importance of this about how the narrative in the Axeman comes out very easily because, firstly, Robert Lance and Miriam Davis's, then, well, why not go through some of these other sources that she has just stated, such as the one by Kevin McQueen or by Gary Christ or by J. Robert Nash, and even maybe in that order or in the order that she has discussed here in the book, the points of contention, I think, are laid out very clearly, and I really want a do-over of the Phantom Killer episodes, because I would like to do it in just a very organized way, as opposed to just jumping all over the map the way I did most recently, so please look out for some future episodes about the Phantom Killer here on this channel, and I would invite you to listen to some of the older ones as well. But about the New Orleans Axeman, you've heard that he seems to be somewhat of an inconsistent serial killer, mostly using an axe, but maybe a cleaver was used in the earlier attacks. So, some challenge questions have been written out by Miriam C. Davis. Were all the killings named by Talon actually the Axeman crimes? Well, I mean, it seems like it, right? There are these people who just see this dark figure in their home, and then there are people who are dealing with real injuries, but, well, maybe some of them were not necessarily the Axeman. How about the attack on Joe Romero, who wasn't even a grocer but a barber? I mean, how does that fit into the narrative? Did the Axeman murders begin with the murder of Joseph and Catherine Maggio? Numerous people believe the Axeman began before that, and I talk about this very frequently, that there was one guy who had this theory that the Axeman's first crimes began in 1879 with the DeFore murders, or perhaps a different, more plausible one is that in Texas there were a series of axe crimes, and that happened before. And even Miriam C. Davis has talked about in the early 1900s there were the cleaver attacks that might have been committed by the same person. So lots of people believe the Axeman operated well before 1918. Or was the mafia involved? Okay, I've just attempted to tell you some brief segments about the first two questions. For this question, I have no idea. I'm seeing nothing but speculation about this mafia angle. I mean, if someone wants to talk about how a crime was committed in 1879 and look at the similarities about how it was the same person, that I can examine because I have the two different crimes to examine, the DeFore murders and perhaps the Maggio murders or the Cortimiglia murder, singular. But what the mafia involved, I mean, I'm just seeing nothing but mental gymnastics on the parts of people who would think that. And it's something that I've definitely considered in the past. I mean, it makes sense, right? That the mafia is going after grocers primarily of Italian descent, but not always. Maybe they went after a barber like Romero. Or maybe that this is just something unrelated and they missed the mark. And in Roberto Lan's Ready to Hang, this is discussed by someone saying that the mafia did not target women and children. And as we said very clearly, Mary Cortimiglia was murdered and she was a child. Or how about Harriet Lowe? She was also murdered by the Axeman, even though it took about 2 months for her to pass away in the hospital. And at that point, she was perhaps a little bit delirious and saying a bunch of far-out things. That's one of the reasons why they thought Louis Bessemer was guilty. But I'll go on to the next question here, because the honest answer was I don't know to was the mafia involved. Were all the Axeman's victims Italian, and if they were, why did he target them? Short answer, no. Extended answer, maybe the Axeman didn't commit the crimes that weren't against the Italian people, and though that was a different killer, maybe there were maybe there were two killers. I mean, what I think Miriam Davis is going to hint at is that maybe someone was targeting only the Italians and a different killer was targeting the non-Italians or the barber. Why did Rosie Cortimiglia accuse Frank Giordano and his father of murdering her daughter? Did she later change her story, and if so, why? Well, we've already heard the conventional narrative. She blamed them because she hated them. And my absolute first instinct, we're talking about a gut instinct here, not a brain instinct, but a gut instinct, is that she was just so traumatized by the loss of her daughter that she needed someone to blame. And I think that that doesn't require any further explanation. Did Esther Pepitone murder Joseph Mumfree? Well, in the conventional narrative, yes, unless there's something that we will learn later on. Most important, was Joseph Mumfree the Axeman? And if he wasn't, who was? Well, the honest answer again is I don't know, but if he wasn't, who was? Well, maybe a mafia hitman, or some deranged maniac, or both. How do these questions help one understand what it was like to live in New Orleans during the Axeman's reign of terror? I think that it shows that people were experiencing a lot of hysteria, and that these are very simple crimes, where they often appear motiveless, so people didn't necessarily know what to look for. So that's why there are all these freak out attacks. Oh, I think the door panel has been touched, or I think that someone is trying to break in. But the final line here of this section that I would like to share with you is, in the course of my investigation, I discovered that Talon was wrong in many details, some unimportant and some not. At the end of the Axeman War Wings, he wrote, "It is extremely doubtful that anyone will ever know more about whether Mumfree was the Axeman." He was wrong about that. And I'm not going to make you wait because, this isn't some type of a storytelling contest. Miriam C. Davis openly told me that she can prove that Joseph Mumfree wasn't the Axeman, and we will be exploring that here in her book, The Axeman of New Orleans, The True Story, and look at all the reasons why, and or why not. But that still raises a bigger question. Okay, if not him, then who actually did it? But as for now, I would like to leave you with this, that what is your response to any of those questions about why do you think Rosie Cortimiglia lied, or do you think there was one killer or multiple killers? Do you think that one person was targeting the Italians and one was not? Share anything you want in the comments section down below. Respond to any of the questions or any of the comments made in this episode. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. There was always BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram, and I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.